All right, so what I've done here, figure I better explain this before I go too far. Kind of got carried away. You can buy a little stud gun that welds little pieces on these places where you can pull dents. If you don't have that, and especially if you're at home just doing, your own stuff, grab a chunk of waste metal and cut a bunch of these little tabs. When you weld them, make sure they're on good. You can always grind them off. As far as throwing heat in that spot, some people worry, oh, what if it shrinks? Look, it's already all bashed in. You're going to be pulling it out anyway. I don't know. I suppose if you overdid it. So what I did, there was a kind of a big indent right here. So I had to pull that out. And I mean, it was small. You probably could have filled over it. The problem is here. So where you see this whole line, that was a big kink, and you can see where it went all the way down. And here you can see the other kink. So what happened is the guy had a trailer, and I don't know if it jackknifed or he backed in, but I think he jackknifed while backing up. So if you come here where the paint's removed here, it's kind of straight now, but that basically stopped and bent in that. You can see where the fender's kind of just in with the tire. Well, it was on the other side of the tire. Like, this was all smashed in. This being the worst, I've already pulled this. I'm clearly going to have to pull it quite a bit more. You can see there's quite an indent there. You can definitely see down on the last one there. As far as that goes there, we'll just cut that straight out once things start getting straighter, and then just re-weld that back together. And I mean, if it gets too damaged, we can always cut it out and put a little piece in. If you body work and block from this line down, we're okay. So just to explain what I did here, I've already cut off some of the tabs. So I had a few tabs welded on, and all I do is I grab them with a pair of vice grips. Now these vice grips, if you look right here, it's really wide. I can hook a chain on here, and it locks right to here, and that'll pull. Now you can get the proper ones that have a big loop welded on the back of the handle, which is what I'd recommend. I don't have a pair here. My last pair got all bent up, so I got to go buy a new one of those anyway. But yeah, basically, we put this on. Here, let me show you where it's easy. And I have it fairly tight. I'd probably tighten that up because it felt like it was starting to get a little loose. But yeah, I basically grab my chain hook like this. See, it's one that grabs the chain link, and it will slide right in here. And then the chain is basically hooked up to a vehicle over there off of a come-along. I throw a blanket always over everything. If anything lets go, anything goes flying, the blanket just makes everything fall to the ground. So a little less scary. Anyway, so what I had to do, the tin canning, I don't know if you know what that means, but I'm sure you do if you're watching these videos. If you look up here, you'll see where there's a line here that was hammered pretty hard. I don't know if the light will allow it. There you go. So there was a hard kink here. So I'm basically just grabbing a 2-foot level, any kind of straight edge. I usually have these 5-foot metal pieces bent. I can run it down. And as you run it down, how would I explain it? Here, let me grab this level. You can see how it can rock. But you always want to have a little bit of a curl out and not a curl in. So if you come here, right here is lower than the rest, right? I mean, it's very minimal. I don't know if you can see it or see light through it. It's pretty tight. But basically, you want to have enough room that it's in just a touch where you can get a bit of filler on it. Because we're basically going to probably come from here up to the plastic over to here, right? So basically, hang on, pretty much there. If I hold my camera right here, everything you see within the camera, we're going to take most of that paint off down to bare metal. So everything in there has to be just straight enough that you don't exceed, say, 1/4 inch of Bondo or filler, whatever you like to use. I like it to be really, really thin, so I would guess less than a 1/16. And so far up here, I'm going to have less than a 1/16. But here, of course, you can see how I'm going to have to grind these off. Now, I just used a cutting wheel, and what I do, I put that little screw right against the body, and you know, I kind of lean into it, but basically it just gives you a little bit of space there. So, you know, if you develop some heat, it's more likely to come out than to go into the big panel. And then later I'll grab a flap disc because they don't get as hot, and I'll just chew away a bit of these, moving them from one to one at a time, you know. But when I started pulling this, it created a big divot here. So the way this was explained to me by a guy that I like, and you can go check out his videos, Lakeside Auto Body, he kind of explained, and this really helped me because I was doing it kind of a little bit all over and a little bit at a time, but he says in a few of his videos, sometimes when you start near the outer edge, basically the last thing to twist and work your way out, and not to the point where it all the way comes out, but enough that it comes out and holds, and then keep working your way in from the least to the worst. And what he explained was the way the accident happened, you want to recreate the reverse. Right, so in the case of this, something hard hit it here, and that cranked. So those are the two spots. So if you pull that out first and get it straight, all the other little pieces are going to kind of wave, and you know, you get a lot of tin canning, a lot of stuff hard to deal with. So you have to almost start where the kinks are and start pulling the middle. Now, I don't necessarily, when I put the puller on the vice grips or on the pins, whatever you're using, once I get enough weight that it moves out, I don't necessarily crank it till, you know, the chain gets singing tight. I might leave it just snug so that I can grab it by hand and kind of, you know, move it up and down a little bit. And as you see it pulling out, right, let's say in the case of this, so this is exactly what I did on this one. As I was pulling here and here, I'd kind of move the chain up and down, and as you see it pulling out, you can see the kink up here almost trying to go away, but it can't, right, because it's too hard of a kink. So what I did is I put a little pressure and I started hitting on here, back and forth, working it down, and I mean, it took 30 seconds, right? And what you see, that mark, that's no longer a kink, that's just scratching on the paint from the hammer. We'll grind all that off. You could probably put a thick 3 coats of that filler primer on here and block it. Like, it's pretty close. There's a little bit of a divot, if I can catch it right here. Again, when you put the straight edge on it, it's not that bad. Now, sometimes, because the metal may be stretched, if you create something like this somewhere, like this was a high spot, it's now a low spot. But the cool thing with that, I can't push it out easy from inside, and I can't push it in. But it controls all the tin canning, because you want the metal to sit fairly relaxed, right? Like I can do this now, you know, where if I did that before so much as touched it, it'd pop in like 2 inches. The other thing that it did, you have to keep in mind of as you're pulling these things. Now, the first thing I pulled was that bottom. Now, when I say up on the panel, I did this line here. That was because, how would I explain it? Yeah, so from the outside and you work your way in, and you know, you take the least bad and work your way into the really bad. But down here, the reason I pulled this first, even though this was hardcore, this is gonna, it's really mangled. The framing in behind the fender was mangled, so that's all been pulled out. And I basically just reached around. There was a place where I could hook two different hooks of chain. Did the same thing, pulled it out. And where I came down here, it's roughly, when I run a straight edge here on the other side, it's about the same, you know, within reason. So once we put that little plastic back on and everything, that'll be fine. But the reason I pulled this out first, there was also a big kink here and there, right? So this was caved right in. So this kink here, now I have to pull this one out. This one I already pulled. I'll cut that off, pull this. But I had to get this line. You can see there's a little bit of a up here. I'm gonna have to pull the plastic off the other side. They may have that, they may not. But basically I had to get that line straight enough where it goes, this upper line right here. There's a body line, I don't know if you can see it. Right where my finger is here, there's a body line. Kind of like you can see that shape on the front. So I had to make sure this was straight and keep this concave. And the reason I had the tape, you could kind of look down it and run a straight edge because I wanted it to be the same as the other side. Because what was happening, it looked straight by eye, but it was actually going in and back out. So by just watching the tape, I never hit there, nothing's been welded there, nothing was hammered or pulled there. All the work was done here until that sat where it should. There's a little dimple right here where everything meets, like a low spot from the factory. It wasn't quite right, so I had to come in here and pull down here, but then knock this back in. Now where this thing got stretched, which was really weird, you'll see right here, there's a little high spot that you can barely tell. And eventually, this indent just disappears into nothing. But it had stretched so much, it disappeared here. There was no indent down here like the other side. So when I had this, once I had finished this and got this straight, this spot here, around this piece to this piece. So all this was tin canning. So I had to put tension here and pull it. You can see all these little waller marks. So basically I took a body hammer, this guy right here with the pick, and I had to go in and recreate this. Now I went in a little farther than I had to, just to make sure I had room for filler, you know, so we can block that out real nice. But the cool thing is, as I started doing that and re-putting that back in there, all the stretched metal got pulled. This kind of fixed itself. The little bit left of that fixed itself. I think that's okay. That's just going to be filler. The next thing I have to do, you know, there is that dimple there. Might be a little overdone. I might pull that out, but we'll see. The problem I'm having now is right here, there's a line here and a line here. And this should be perfectly horizontal. But if you come down, you can almost see that it's not, which means the bottom is tipped in. So the reason I ground right across here, I'm actually going to put plates just under this lip. Here, let me grab one. Like so. And I'm literally going to put my weld right on the line, you see? That way I can pull that out. I'm going to put about 5 or 6 on there. Pull a little bit out at a time. Now some guys argue you can weld a great big long one and pull it. I might try that. You know, now if you have the little pins and the little spot welder with the pins, you can basically weld about 5, 6, 7 of them and grab them with the wide vice grips, which, you know, the same thing. But this is fairly straight up to about here. And then there's a little high spot. So I might do this in one, come over here and do this in one, and then a little piece here to finish it off. Like again, there's going to be a little bit of fill. There was a low spot here, but to pull that, I'm going to have to start pulling on these as well. If you look down here, there's a crinkle, but until I get this straight, I can't really do anything with that. Now I may have to pull the bumper off to get at that, but I'm hoping we can weld some little pins or rods, whatever on there, and pull that out as well. But once we get that till it starts to all move as one, then we'll pull this. And then we'll come down here. And even though you can hit this on the back, there's kind of a framing. There's nothing I can do here from the back. I did a Dodge Ram recently. Same exact thing happened, but he slid backwards down a hill and jackknifed. Now I could get in through his taillight here and put some stuff in there and push it out and then hammer the dents away. And I gotta say it worked really well. But this one, there's very little... Like you can't get in the big holes from the taillights back here. That's solid inside. There's a post. That's it. Now sometimes if you have to, you could cut that out and then weld it back in. But between the inner wall and the fender skin, there's not a lot of room for hammering. So I think the best thing to do is to pull it from the outside. This one's going to be tough, but sometimes what you got to do, if there's bracing, you cut the bracing out, straighten out the fender, fix your bracing, weld it back in. But yeah, so I wanted to show you that before I cut all these tabs off. But yeah, I don't know if you saw the earlier video, but this truck was smashed in pretty good. You come down here now, it's not, well, the top flow is really nice. You can put a straight edge on that. There's a place where it looks like the paint shines down at the bottom of the taillight. I'm trying to catch it there so you can see that little crease. That is less than a 1/16 of an inch, but it'll show in the light. So we're gonna pull the bottom, like we're gonna fine tune this a bit, maybe grab the hammer, but basically there's a point where all the tin canning's gonna stop, but you don't want it to stop because it's under tension, because then if anything moves, it'll pop in. You want it to kind of be in a place where it can't go in, can't go out, feels a little bit relaxed, so to speak. You know, because you don't want it shaking and buckling over time and knocking your fill off or primer, whatever you're using. But yeah, so this is, you know, you don't need all the crazy tools you see on all the shows, TVs, whatever. I literally welded little bits of scrap steel to that, threw vice grips on there. Now I do have a lot of different vice grips for clamping. Just make sure that whatever you're hooking to, because you don't want it to fly off and hit you in the face. hence the big blanket thrown over the chain. Make sure that whatever you're hooking to hooks good. If you're a really, really good welder, right off the back, weld a great big loop on there. Make sure whatever you weld on there is strong enough for the chain. And again, you don't have to pull on the chain cable. Look, I've done this with ratchet straps, you know, and if you don't trust the little ones, get those ones that are about 2 inches wide. The heavy duty ones, I think they're good for like 1,500 pounds, whatever they are. All you have to do is put tension to pull it a bit and then grab it by hand and kind of hammer around while you're pulling it. So you don't have to, you're not pulling the truck over. You're just pulling the tin out, right? It's just common sense. You know, if you're going to reef and reef and reef, I mean, you could technically destroy the fender and yank it out a foot, you know, so don't do that. But you should be able to see where once there's tension and then it kind of pulls back a bit, make sure there's just a touch of tension on it. Nothing like the weight of the chain. Like my chain don't look straight when I have this hooked. You can see it's arced. And the weight of that chain will pull a lot of it out. And then a little bit of tension, just leaning your hand on there. Like I'm not saying struggle with it. I'm like, just put the weight of your hand and push a little bit. You'll see it. And then as you hammer around it, you'll see it move out. I might take a video of that later. But anyway, for now, that's it. Thanks for watching.